Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
I shared with you the first time you and I met. I shared with you, and I asked you before we went, I guess, live here about sharing this, and I'd like to.
Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
I'm the poster child for compartmentalization. My wife and I married when we were 19 and 18, respectively.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that's insanity in and of itself.
Well, my wife and I were just like, I was basically 20 and she was 19. I was just turned 21 and she was 19.
So you get it.
You got us by years. Yeah, I get it.
Get it. But I share this because we both grew up in very strong Christian homes. We launched into a marriage, and the very first thing we did, we got connected to a church. 2.5 years into marriage, we had our first child, a daughter. 18 months later, our second child, a son. And we navigated in the healthcare world, and we arrived.
Are you in Georgia at this point, or are you here?
I grew up in Macon, Georgia.
Okay.
Went to Georgia Tech, and then navigated the Southeast in the healthcare world.
I see.
I was a hospital CEO in two hospitals in Georgia, one in South Carolina and one in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Came here in 1994. Really a fluke. Really a fluke. I was a young division president with HCA. It was a fluke. It was a great opportunity of a lifetime. I was connected to somebody that really believed in me. I'm not sure my resume was worthy of being a division president. But I landed there and things went incredibly well. Unfortunately, 3 years into that role, I am teaching Sunday school. We are tithing on steroids. We're praying publicly, holding hands at every meal. And I was asked to be a deacon in the church. And I said no. I will tell you, when you compartmentalize your life, you can do anything. It may be unforgiveness. It may be greed. It may be rage. It may be internet pornography. It could be any number of things. But there is nothing in the world more dangerous than compartmentalizing your life. I certainly don't laugh, but I reflect upon myself as the poster child. I mean, I am the poster child for C12 because that's the risk. That's the danger. That's what happens when a man or a woman separates himself from the rest of the world. And I will tell you, if you're living a compartmentalized life, you can do anything. And I'm living proof of that. So
yeah. Is that because you can just justify it? You know, you go to church on Sunday and do that, but then during the week you can just be this whole other person? Is that, and you can kind of justify it that way? Is that what it is about compartmentalization that's just so dangerous?
I think first of all, we are sinful people by nature, and left unto ourselves, we will find darkness. We will find darkness, and in a compartmentalized life, we are at such incredible risk. We're at such incredible risk. I wrote a book some time back entitled "Painful Gifts." After this event, I'm writing a second book right now entitled "Don't Run in God's House." But in that book, I use a phrase that I grew up hearing. Somebody in the church would preach. Somebody in the church would pray, and they would say, how thankful we are to be in God's house today. As if the building was God's house. And I will tell you, I grew up as a young man with a sense of awe and responsibility when I was in the church building. And when I was not, I developed a sense of freedom and independence. What I know, what you know today is God's house are our bodies. and I'm writing about that very thing right now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it really was for me, unbeknownst to me, my childhood, and I'm thankful for the church I grew up in. I'm deeply thankful for it. But it was there that the seeds were planted, that God's house was that building.
Mm-hmm.
And still today, we hear people pray how thankful we are to be in God's house today.
Mm-hmm.
As if that building is where God resides.
And not everywhere else.
And not
Yeah.
but I will tell you, and that's it. If that's God's house, when I am away from it, then I have a degree of freedom and independence. So that is a risk factor that's not about business owners. That's a risk factor for everyone in life.
Yes. And we love to do that, don't we? We love to put God in a box, make him manageable. Growing up, I think particularly in the South, but in Western America, at some level we have a comfort with God. We just don't want him to be in control of our life for sure. So if we can have him be in church or have him have some authority over certain areas of our life, we're okay with that. But certainly not have him be in control of our life.
The reality of it is we want the church to be God's house.
Mm-hmm.
Because if my spirit, if my body houses the living God, then I'm responsible for every word I speak. I'm responsible for every thought I have. That changes the game. So it's fascinating. I'm convinced that those of us who really are thirsting to walk with God, really deep down inside, we want the church to be God's house.
Mm-hmm.
We need the church to be God's house so we can have independence.
Sure. Yeah. Now, was this where, in relation to your kind of career, when did this event happen? And is that what got you into C12 then, or kind of picking back up the story of how you got into C12
Yes.
to begin with?
Well, it's a great question, and I can answer it fairly simply. And I do. It transpired. The meltdown in my life and my family transpired when I was a division president with HCA.
I see.
That's where it transpired. Mm-hmm. What I must tell you is this: we came to a place in marriage that we had no chance. As dark as it was, there was no way that anybody could survive from where we were. And God gifted us with a front row seat at the Red Sea. My wife and I got to see God part the Red Sea right in front of us. And I don't want to mistake this. I don't want to suggest that it was not painful. We carry scars to this day, 20 plus years later. I don't want to minimize that. But I will tell you, God gave us a seat at the Red Sea, and we saw him part it. Mm-hmm. And God allowed Jeannie and I to walk across on dry ground.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this. If somebody's listening and they've heard nothing else, this is the most important thing that I will say. We look in the book of Acts and we see the disciples are there, Jesus is gone. And Peter and John are drawn in before the Sanhedrin, and the leadership says, listen, we've already executed Jesus. And if you don't stop this, we'll execute you too. And in one of the most fascinating verses in all of Scripture, in the 4th chapter of Acts, they say, do what you want to, say what you want to, but how can we not speak of that which we have seen? Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating. It's really fascinating. Jesus has just been executed. They are presumably next in line, and they are unwavering in their commitment. And there's a reason. And the reason is they were eyewitnesses. Mm. It is a critical word. They were eyewitnesses. What changed my life is the day that I became an eyewitness. As long as I was churched, but God was arm's length, I could compartmentalize, and really God was not that relevant in my life. And when I saw the Red Sea parted, when God radically rescued, when the Spirit of the living God radically rescued me, radically rescued my marriage, radically rescued our family, I became an eyewitness. And I will tell you, once you're an eyewitness, you are changed forever. You can never be the same again after you've seen the hand of God move.